71 years we've done this conference. This is the first time we've had the Prime Minister of Canada here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for including me. Thanks for everything you guys are doing.
One of the first meetings we had together was in 2017, early 2017, when another first, the Prime Minister of Canada, came to the APMA offices to say, how can we do NAFTA, upcoming NAFTA negotiations differently, better? We talked then about getting a better deal for Canadian auto parts suppliers, and I think that we did pretty well in that agreement. In the last 2 years, we've landed $25 billion worth of new investments. Tell us how that worked.
Well, first of all, I mean, you remember those moments in 2017 where there was a lot of worry that and the focus was just, okay, are we going to survive? Are we going to hold some sort of NAFTA, given the protectionism we were seeing out of the United States and the real threats to simply rip it up? But you were one of the first ones who caught on to my mindset, which was, no, let's take this as an opportunity to build a NAFTA that's going to work for the next 25, the next 50 years. And key to that was the kind of Team Canada approach that we've talked about a lot. I mean, you being in there from the beginning, Flavio, at the association, but also having labor representatives, having business representatives, having everyone around the same table to figure out where we were going to build that competitive advantage that Canada have, even within a renewed NAFTA that would be a challenging context. And we succeeded. I mean, we really saw that Canada's strengths in manufacturing and integration into the United States was going to allow us not just to protect NAFTA, but to boost it in ways that were meaningful, and it worked.
6 of the world's 7 largest automakers have committed or recommitted to this space. Electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, batteries, powertrains, and all of that supply chain. Recently, Bloomberg NEF said Canada is number 2 for the EV battery supply chain. Probably part of the reason why they've picked us and why they're investing here. But the other part is something that you're uniquely doing, which is reaching out to the CEOs yourself. I imagine, you and I chatted a few weeks ago, and I said, does anybody say no when the Prime Minister's switchboard says the Prime Minister's on the line?
Yeah, the 7th, but no, I'm kidding. We're still working.
How do those conversations go? When you're pitching Canada CEOs, what are we talking about?
It really is, and this is something that we've been pitching since 2015 in terms of opportunities to invest in Canada and why Canada's a great, stable, positive place to invest. But I mean, there's a lot of advantages. We talk about the supply chains, we talk about the natural resources, but it all comes down to the workers. The conversations we have with CEOs internationally about the reliability, the education levels, the diversity, the growing workforce at a time where so many Western countries are flatlining in terms of their population, the strong social safety net, things like dental care and child care, on $10 a day child care, on top of healthcare systems. These are things that have an impact in 2 ways on international CEOs. One, they see that people are going to be well supported, and maybe their health insurance won't cost as much from a corporate standpoint, and that's sort of dollars and cents. But more than that, they see Canada as a stable, reliable, value-driven, optimistic group of people who are positive about the future. And that's been the story of Canada for a long time. As countries around the world are lurching towards populism or having extremely divided moments, Canada is cohesive in a way that is appealing, especially for CEOs that are looking to make a 20-year, a 40-year investment. They want to know that it's not just good right now under this particular government, but there's a trend line that they're going to be part of for a long time. And that really adds to the competitive advantage and the drawing in. Because yes, I've spoken with a lot of CEOs directly, and certainly François Champagne has done a lot of that too, but so do the governors of a whole bunch of different American states, so do the leaders of various countries, because they know what happens when a world-leading company like Volkswagen chooses to make an investment in a community like St. Thomas. And these sorts of, the pitch we can make covers just about everything. Yes, it's good workers, and you know, the highest education levels in the OECD, and you know, strong, stable communities. But it's also things like reconciliation. Like, for a long time, Canada got the reputation as a country where it's hard to get big projects built because they get bogged down in the courts. Well, in 2015, we made a decision, no. We're going to change our relationship with Indigenous people. We're going to bring them into the conversation, invest in them appropriately, restore trust. And what that finds now is, as we're looking at lithium mines, as we're looking at new projects in the clean economy, Indigenous partners are much more willing to step up to the table and feel like they're going to be part of it. And that reassuring allows for a stability when in other countries around the world there is not the social acceptance of a whole bunch of investments that are worrisome. Our trade deals, we're the only G7 country with a free trade deal with every other G7 country. We have free trade with 2/3 of the global GDP. And that's because, as a country, we were able to sign trade deals over the past 8 years at a time when other parts of the world were running from trade and going protectionistic. How did we do it? Well, we talked about labor standards, we talked about environmental standards, we brought women and Indigenous issues into those trade deals so that people, citizens, could be confident that that growth that comes from trade will also accrue to them. Because we know trade increases growth and increases GDP, but nothing guarantees that that growth will be fairly shared on any automatic way. And that's why people have been pulling their supports away from trade and from globalization around the world, because even though the rich got richer, the middle class would fall further and further behind. So that's where our focus on that from the very beginning was, if we build an economy that works for the middle class and people working hard to join it, it ends up working for everyone, and then we get the license to go over and build these big deals and draw in, even with big investments, a Volkswagen, a Stellantis, all the other investments we're making, where we're putting forward public money because we know it's going to lead to good jobs. Well, people wouldn't be automatically comfortable about that if we hadn't shown that we are making sure we're putting everything at the center for everyone.
There's a lot in there, most of my questions. So let's
we can break out some pieces of it.
Let's freewheel a little bit. The Biden administration is dedicated to a lot of the same things that we are. They're bringing the U.S. Treasury to bear. We talk about a free market, but we're also talking about prescribing product. We are legislating the transition to electric vehicles. We recently landed a couple of really big deals. A big battery investment in St. Thomas that you talked about, and a really big battery and R&D investment with Stellantis and LG in Windsor that also guaranteed the Brampton plant was going to continue to make cars. Somebody asked me, "Are you tired of playing defense?" And I said, "No, we have a partnership with the federal government. They go and lend to deals, and we help explain them. I have you on the spot now. I know why we like it, and I know what all of us have encountered, which is fantastic news for the industry. How can we help sell that so that we can keep going forward down that path?"
First of all, I mean, St. Thomas is a really great example of this, where what happened in the community in 2011 when the big auto plant pulled out of St. Thomas was more than just those jobs disappearing. It impacts the Timbits Hockey League's sponsorship. It impacts the local restaurants and the local real estate. And there's a drifting away of people in a beautiful, vibrant community because you don't have a sense that there is a bright future there for them. So being able to land a Volkswagen there in an industry that's going to be around for a long time, and that is linked to supply chains internal to Canada for lithium, cobalt, and other essential ingredients in this, is not just good news from an economic standpoint. It's good news from a community standpoint. It means jobs, it means activity, it means a reliance on the future. And actually, one of the examples for me, the strongest examples, was when we were in Hamilton making an announcement at the ArcelorMittal Dofasco plant that we were shifting from coal-fired steelmaking to electric arc. Now, the conversations I had, I was all excited about the environmental imprint that would have, the cleaner air as it blows eastwards across Toronto. This was going to be good news for all sorts of different reasons that were good for the environment. But as I talked to the steelworkers, I understood how excited they were about it. And it was like people coming up to me saying that they were second, third, even fourth generation Hamilton steelworkers. And they were worried because everyone talks about the jobs of the future and the clean economy. And these steelworkers are standing there in scuffed up overalls and grease on their faces and just, they're hard-working folks. And it's like anytime people talk about the clean economy, they say, well, is there room for tough jobs like ours? And suddenly when we announced this carbon arc technology that ArcelorMittal, steelmaking giant around the world, was pioneering in Canada because of our green electricity, both nuclear and hydro, because of our workforce, because of the investments we've made in science and innovation over the past few years. Suddenly, those steelworkers said, I now know there's going to be a seventh and an eighth generation of Hamiltonian steelworkers because of this investment. And that's the challenge people are facing right now. Everything is hard. Like the geopolitics have shifted, supply lines have shifted, inflation is too high, interest rates are too high, and the environment is meaning everything's changing. Plus climate events, extreme weather events, there's so much uncertainty. People are so worried about whether their job's going to carry them through to retirement, whether there's going to be a job for their kids in their communities, because everything is uncertain. And suddenly, we're getting investments that come in and a government that's saying, no, we're skating to where the puck is going to be. We know the world is changing in all these ways, and we're there to make the investments to make sure Canada can lead in that. And in the conversations I have with people around the world, other leaders are talking about their challenges, they look at what Canada has. It's the growing, diverse, ambitious, well-trained, well-educated workforce that shows up for work a hell of a lot more in terms of absenteeism than factories in the United States and elsewhere around the world because people are strong and committed. We have natural resources from fossil fuels that are going to continue to be important for the next decades or so. But as we transition to hydrogen, as we transition to more nuclear, as we transition to continuing with renewables, those are advantages we have. The stores of lithium, of uranium, of all the critical minerals that the world needs in a reliable partner There are so many reasons to be optimistic about Canada and the things that we've been working on over the past few years, whether it's reconciliation, whether it's acknowledging climate change and fighting and investing in those renewables. One of the big reasons, on top of workers, that Volkswagen came is because the reliability of the energy supply, of a clean energy supply. Because companies know that their clients, their customers, want to be reassured that they're the good guys, that they're doing things responsibly. That's part of the competitive advantage that people are looking for in the marketplace. And all these things we're doing together fit into a cohesive narrative that is no longer the trickle-down view of building an economy, but is putting those building blocks in place that is going to create those opportunities for a St. Thomas, for Bécancour, for Timmins as part of the supply chain, we're making an announcement out in BC in the coming months on EVs as well. I mean, there's things that matter right across the country that people can see themselves in the future. So even though, yes, groceries are way too expensive right now, and there's so much challenging in our daily lives now, being able to point to a near future in which things are just going to get better and better for communities and for Canadians is a real guarantor of social cohesion and stability into the coming years.
We just heard from Sayona Mining, and you recently visited them in Quebec. And you talk about Bécancour especially, and we talk about Timmins and a whole bunch of those northern communities that were mining communities, or they were forestry communities. We now talk about them being part of the automotive supply chain. Bloomberg NEF said we're number 2, but I think we know there's a long shadow between the promise of what's in the ground and then profitability of extraction and the long timetables from all levels of government and all communities on getting a mine approved and running. Want to give us a bit of insight on how you see that? And these cars we're saying they should be electrified in the next 5 to 10 years, but some of those processes go past that time frame.
Well, I mean, first of all, one of the reasons why we have been, or over the past decades, there's been a lot of offshoring, is because cost it's so much cheaper to get lithium processed in China, extracted and processed in China than anywhere else right now. And that will remain for the foreseeable future. But people are starting to understand that pure lowest cost production is not all it cracked up to be. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has shown what happens when Europe got overly reliant on cheaper, easy energy coming in from Russia. They became highly dependent on oil and gas from Russia in a way that when Russia showed its true colors or decided to make the horrific mistake it did in invading Ukraine, it's costing them an awful lot to try and lurch and create more reliable supply chains. And we know that China is a big and important part of the global economy, but having a near 100% reliance on China for our batteries of the future, for our green economy and our technological advancements is not a wise choice for any country to make or even any company to make. So when Canada stands up and says, we are a reliable partner that will never weaponize our economic resources against an ally. B, we're going to do things in environmentally responsible ways and generate the technologies that allows us to be cutting edge environmentally responsible, because that's what consumers are asking for more and more around the world. C, we're going to build strong, livable communities for workers, make sure that union wages or their equivalent are part of our offering, with good health care, with opportunities for advancement and education, and strong, livable communities. Those are 3 advantages that a lot of countries around the world simply cannot offer anymore. And we spent a long time, and I know you guys all know this as well, focused on the maximum efficiency of supply chains, with just-in-time delivery, rolling through the inventory as quickly as possible, making sure that everything was maximum smooth, fast, and efficient. And what we all discovered during COVID is that the quest for pure efficiency in supply chains didn't leave a lot of room for resiliency. Didn't leave a lot of room for what happens when things go sideways. And the world is now realizing, okay, we need to have reliable allies that, yes, because of our environmental standards, because of our labor standards, it's going to be slightly more expensive, at least at first, until we build up the technologies that are competitive around the world, to process and build mines in Canada. But the value that brings, the predictability, the independence, the innovation, the strong, stable societies with a good middle class because they have good middle class jobs, the advantages of that is, according to me, and according to many people, going to outweigh the savings of a few pennies on longer supply chains from unreliable partners in the world. And that's how Canada's positioning itself. And I'll be honest, this is a decision that we took over the past 8 years to look at those inputs. You talk about permitting process on mines. Well, the previous Conservative government did a really good job of rubber stamping big projects right away, cutting through regulatory red tape so they could try and get things built, whether it's pipelines or mines, only to see them bogged down in the courts within a few years because they didn't get proper social license, they didn't follow the proper regulatory processes, they didn't bring in Indigenous peoples as partners. And there was a long stretch in which people were really down on Canada's ability to build things, not because they couldn't get approvals, but because that approval didn't end up holding long enough to build things, because they got bogged down in the courts on Indigenous issues. So we knew that reconciliation, which was framed by Canadians who wanted fixing our relationship with Indigenous peoples back in 2015 as a nice to have, as a moral imperative, which it is, but it's also an economic imperative to make sure we can actually develop in right and responsible ways all the resources we have that the world is going to need. So yes, we're streamlining things, we're accelerating things, but the biggest way we're doing that is by creating those partnerships and that bonds of trust with communities that have a legitimate role in stewarding and overseeing these lands.
Do you get to drive anymore?
No, not very. I miss it intensely.
I bet you do. You've got a nice little ride, and
yeah.
A lot of us in this industry are really passionate about the product, and we try to use the passion of the product to bring in the next generation. You see a vehicle in the corner there where a whole bunch of us in this room took a shot at what would a Canadian car look like, and what would some of that technology look like if we could express to the world what we could bring to bear. We theorized we could do something bumper to bumper and to sell these companies, build it here, buy it here. But I think the best offshoot of this project is we've got so many new people looking at the automotive sector at a time when we've got a really acute labor shortage. I spent a week with some of my friends at Porsche in Germany a few years ago. And Boris is here. He'll know my surprise when I heard this. In Germany, one of the things that I heard in every one of the spots we went was, can't get young people in. That's our biggest. I said, how could you not want to work at Porsche? Obviously, didn't grow up in my house. But, you met my son. He grew up in my house. He's not saying he's going to join the auto sector. we have been trying to address that labor gap by bringing in women, youth, and others in communities that have been historically excluded. I know this is very important for you. Advice from us, for us on that. Canadian workers come in from all demographic groups. How do we do a better job of pulling them in?
Well, I mean, first of all, what's exciting for me about the Arrow is that it really highlights the innovation and the creativity of Canadian industry, and that for me is a key part of it. One of my first auto announcements wasn't a shop floor, or wasn't a new plant. It was actually the GM Markham engineering facility, because they were totally focused on both self-driving cars and the new technologies and all those sorts of things that they knew was the knowledge economy around vehicles. Well, Canada does that extremely well. We have both the innovation and the technology in our people and in our engineers and our scientists, but we also have the raw materials to contribute to it. And our capacity to fit those together is entirely reliant on our people and on the ecosystems we build up. We talked about the fact that Canada is the fastest growing country in terms of population of all our G7 partners, all the largest economies in the world. It's because we remain positive towards immigration. And yes, we have to catch up on building housing. We have to make sure we're supporting our social safety net and our healthcare to respond to all these new arrivals. But it is a huge advantage for Canada to be able to bring in people and give them opportunities, not just to work, but to build a family, to build a community, to build a future. And one of the things that we found sort of around the world, and you'll know this from your own workplaces as well, that if you have 5 engineers who all grew up in the same part of town, all went to the same high school, they all went to the same program in the same university, and you sit them in a room, you tell them to come up with an innovative solution for, they're 5 boys, tell them to come up with an innovative solution around a given challenge, and they're going to come up with a great idea, but it'll be one idea. Whereas if you put together 5 engineers who come from vastly different backgrounds, very different personal stories, have worked in different industries or educated in different parts of the world, come from very different stories, you put them in a room to say, come up with a solution to this problem, they're going to come up with a higher level of creative, innovative, interesting solutions that come at the problems from different directions. That's where diversity is such a huge lever and strength for Canadian innovation. It's what we do and we don't even think about it anymore. Now, it's challenging in getting that group to be cohesive and work in a way that, 5 kids who all went to school together might be smoother. But the outcome and our capacity to succeed on putting that diversity together as an offering to the world in our solutions, but also as being able to draw on examples or products that are going to work well in different parts of the world for growing companies, these are things that we can't overstate how key that's going to be to the Canadian advantage. And we're talking not just the biggest companies, but small auto parts manufacturers, small innovators, small businesses that are pulling together diversity from the community around them are going to be better off. And that's what the world is busy trying to figure out. And so many countries remain trapped in a model where their identity is of a particular ethnicity or language or religion or whatever, when Canada has, by definition, so much difference and diversity in it that we define ourselves instead by shared values, shared approaches, shared goals and aspirations for our communities and our neighbors, that it creates a fresh kind of cohesion that really, really works as a competitive advantage in the world. And that kind of resilience is what people are looking for, and that's where you have shone as an industry in being able to pull all this together.
That's generous, and thank you on that. And I think you're right on what those advantages, how we can bring them to the table. I'll leave one final thought here. We're down to the last couple minutes. We had Olivia Chow, the mayor of Toronto, open today, and we have Doug Ford speaking over dinner. And a lot of people watch politics as a spectator sport, and they see the partisanship. But I know none of this was possible if the stuff I get to see from behind the scenes is how closely you all work together. Different stripes, different levels of government. We're on the biggest investment run in the history of the Ontario's auto sector and Canadian auto sector. It's because you guys don't do it as a spectator sport. Any thoughts for everybody here, a little peek behind the veil on working together with people of different stripe in government?
Well, a great example is the kinds of investments we've been able to draw in Ontario and in Quebec have been done with leaders who are sort of further right along the spectrum from me. But a similar focus on building strong communities and good jobs and growth. There's a lot made about partisanship these days, especially the kind of toxicity we're seeing in some countries and in some corners. But the reality is, for me, and I told this to a group of Western mayors that I met a few months ago here in Toronto, I said, partisanship isn't anymore whether you're slightly left of center or whether you're slightly right of center or even solidly left or solidly right. The actual partisan distinctions end up being more, are you in the business of trying to invest and solve challenges that people are facing? Or are you in the business of reflecting back the frustrations and anxiety that people are feeling and utilizing that rather than trying to solve for the problems? In 2015, we came forward with a plan that was going to grow the middle class and support people working hard to join it. Everything from our investments in the Canada Child Benefit, which cut child poverty in half, to reconciliation, to environment, to inclusive anti-racism strategies, all fed in together to having more resilient, diverse, successful communities where you built an economy that works for all Canadians. And it's really tempting in politics to simplify everything down to a bumper sticker or a 7-second TikTok video. But everybody knows the challenges we're facing are coming at us from every different direction. And there is no one simple answer. What you have to do is roll up your sleeves, pull together partners at all orders of government, listen to science and evidence and data, listen to people and invest in them, and remain optimistic about the fact that as challenging as the time right now, Canada has been through challenging times before, and we've gotten through them by doubling down on who we are. Open, optimistic, ambitious people ready to work hard as hell and build that better future for the next generation and for our neighbors. That is the story of this country. And that ability to come together and work on that, I will work with anyone who is similarly optimistic for their communities and their country. And there's lots of partners out there across the spectrum. But the choices we get to make in politics and as voters and as electors is there a strong, concrete, tangible vision on how to meet the future where it's going to be? Or do we fall back on a backward-looking, let's make it great like it used to be? There must be a catchier way of saying that, but that's not the way Canadians, I think, are going to respond, and that's why I'm so happy to work with folks on my left, folks on my right, to deliver for citizens, and we're going to keep doing it, because that's what we've been doing.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for the openness of this government to work together with this industry, with ministers like Philomena Tassi, who's here, and for your candor today. All of that has been so positive that I'm going to ignore the audacity of wearing Montreal Canadian socks in the city of Toronto. Thank you very much.
I'm a Habs man, always will be. Thank you.